Hey guys, so in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about the differences between FP&A and strategic finance. We've gotten this question a few times, and so I thought, why not just put together a quick video to start to explain what the differences are, and they're not always that clear. So let's jump in and talk a little bit about what the differences between FP&A and strategic finance are. Okay, so let's start with understanding high level what FP&A is. Generally, FP&A is a pretty well understood term. It's financial planning and analytics, or financial planning and analysis, and it's usually one of the core finance roles. And typically FP&A will involve things like budgeting, reporting on how actuals happen, a lot of maybe historical understanding of what happened in the past, what happened with budget versus actuals, and things like that. But a really important part to understand with FP&A is it's typically one of the first and most needed functions in any business, especially, a startup or high growth startup and things like that. And the way we like to see it here at the Academy is that FP&A is almost a foundation for strategic finance. And so, what are sort of like these check boxes or the foundations that need to be built? What are they? So, generally speaking, we should have a pretty good process or format of a basic financial model. We should have a pretty basic process or format for budgeting. This is working cross functionally with the different guilds to understand what their budget are. Pretty straightforward budget or budgeting process, sorry. And we should also have a pretty straightforward process on then reporting on those actuals versus budget. So, creating a budget versus actual, things like that. And then the last part of an FP&A role is then also working with your accounting team to ensure all the accounting books, the general ledgers and things like that all reconcile and they all tie. And so understanding those core functions of FP&A can really now help us understand where the differences between FP&A and strategic finance come into play. Okay, so now that we understand how FP&A creates that foundation, what exactly is strategic finance, and then how does it play its role on top or adjacent to FP&A? The way I would describe it is the strategic finance team would come and start to use FP&A as a foundation to start to create business frameworks that would allow the business to grow in a very, very strategic and profitable manner. So what's a really good example? FP&A would typically look at metrics maybe like revenue or net income or COGS or gross margin and things like that. A strategic finance function obviously would still look at those metrics, but they're not only focused on revenue and COGS and things like that. A strategic finance function will start to look at things like lifetime value. They'll start to look at things like cost of acquisition, unit economics. They would try to understand sensitivity of which levers of the business are impacting revenue the most. And they'll start to create this cross-functional business partnership where it's not only budgeting. Typically with FP&A, the marketing team will present a budget and you'll say, no, this is too little or too much. But a strategic finance function will create the framework for what is the right amount of spend. I've seen this so many times where we talk to a startup and you'd be like, "Hey, how are you coming up with how much you wanna spend for marketing? Or what's your framework for headcount? How are you thinking about what your product should cost? How are you thinking about what products to roll out or what features to roll out?" And those answers are not going to come from an FP&A team. They're going to come from a strategic finance team that is using all these core foundations we talked about from FP&A to then drive these decisions. So let's look at an example of potentially product rollout and headcount planning. Typically, an FP&A team would wait for the product team and maybe the rest of the C-level team or maybe just the founder to come and say, hey, we want to roll out product X, Y, and Z, and this is the headcount. And the FP&A team will come in, they'll put in the salary ranges, and then they'll create the operating costs for the business. But how would a strategic finance team approach it? Well, they're not just receiving information. A strategic finance team is working directly with the product team, directly with the HR team, and directly with our sales team to now understand what is the optimal a product rollout strategy. Are we rolling out what the customers want? Are we rolling it out in the right timing? Like, should product B come after A, or should product C come before A, and things like that. And then that StratFin team is now working with HR to understand the true optimal skill set required for these roles. And now it goes from a case of, hey, finance team, here is what we need, to, hey, this is the optimal allocation of skills for the optimal product rollout, which is not just coming from a siloed space. The optimal product rollout is a combination of factors with the sales team, the marketing team, and the overall strategy. It is very, very common for companies without a StratFin team to make decisions on product rollout based on only one siloed fact without taking into account multiple factors. This is why sometimes features get rolled out and they're not always hitting the way the company expects them to. Or sometimes a feature would get rolled out only to be priced so incorrectly because the company had to spend so much to roll out this feature, only to realize that if they did it later, or they did it a different way, or layered it in another type of structure, the cost would have come down. And then they could have priced it differently. So this is an example of a core strategic finance function and how it would play a role versus a typical FP&A role. So again, just in general, how do the two differ? FP&A, in our eyes, is definitely a must-need function. They generally start, and generally it's the more function that comes in first at any company, because we need those solid foundation skills. We need to make sure that budgeting, modeling, certain reporting mechanisms, and reconciliation with the accounting team, those are table stakes. They need to be done well, and a solid FP&A team can do that. And once you do that, you can now start to layer your strategic finance function. And again, the strategic finance function works really closely with an FP&A team. And sometimes the FP&A function will fall under the strategic finance function. In a lot of the companies we speak to today, we see that's the case, where a strategic finance function ends up owning the FP&A function because of how closely they work together for all different kinds of projects. So that's how we see what the difference is between FP&A and strategic finance. Strategic finance, again, is a new field. It's still growing. But please let us know if you have any questions, or let us know if you have any thoughts in the comments. And yeah, hope this made some sense to everybody, and hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you.